Welcome to PBC Youth. What happens when everything you hold dear is lost? And that is the thought that we have as we enter into a sermon series on Lamentations. Now, why are we doing Lamentations? Well, in our situation right now where we have lost our old lifestyle for a season, so for many of us, for all of us, not many of us, for all of us, there were things that we used to do that we can't do now. Simple things like going to the gym, playing badminton, going for a drink in the coffee shop, going to school, seeing friends, going to work, and so on. So we, all of us, have lost something in this time of the COVID-19 outbreak, and it allows all of us to have a sense of loss, and so therefore it's easier for the sermon series, I think, to talk about Lamentations, because I can tap onto that sense of loss that everybody is feeling. That you have lost something and you're looking back, you're lamenting, meaning that you are sad and about something that you've lost. Next thing is that I think it's important because I think many people, this is my personal observation, don't know how to experience sorrow. What do you mean don't know how to experience sorrow? Well, for too many of us, I think, you run away from sorrow. You avoid it, even though it may be good for you. We'll talk about that another day. But even when sorrow overtakes you, you don't process it well. What happens is that you tend to drown it in unhealthy ways, like drinking, perhaps by seeking fleeting pleasures, so pleasures for a season, maybe going through addictions, coping mechanisms, but even sometimes even somewhat positive ways like playing games or even watching TV, which is not sinful in itself, but you go so deep into it so that you don't have to face the sorrow that has entered your heart. So you're trying to numb the pain. So I don't think that many of us know how to experience sorrow in a positive way. So Lamentations is a good book for us to learn how. And we want to learn how so that your faith is strengthened. And as all of us, the 30, 40 of us who are in the Piazza Baptist Church youth go through this, then as some of us will experience sorrow, this is a fact of life. You will have trouble in this world. That is the promise of Christ. But Christ also said, the next part is, take heart, for I have overcome the world. So we overcome the world through Christ, and I believe that if any of us experience sorrow, we as a body of Christ will know what to do. Okay, so that strengthens our faith, strengthens the church, and I think this is why we're going through Lamentations. Now it is difficult, and it's difficult because suffering is deep. Your pain is so painful that there's a danger that you hear what I say and you think that I am not, I'm dismissing it or I'm taking it lightly. And you may say that Terence doesn't know how I'm feeling, which is perfectly legitimate. Okay, I don't know the suffering that you have experienced, you are currently experiencing, or will experience. All right, and the pain is just very deep. But I still think that there's something in Lamentations for the deepest pain. But it's a question of whether my preaching or the teaching coming out is able to, whether you can hear it or not. Okay. Suffering is wide. Now, it's not just you see. We're talking about a multitude of people from different backgrounds, different experiences with their friends, family, romantic relationships, health, finances. I mean, it's going through all different aspects across different time periods. The suffering that you experience when you're 5, 10, 15 years old is different when you're 20, 30, 40, 60, 70, 80 years old. So it's a lifetime. So how does one sermon or 5 sermons on Lamentations on one book help to address a deep and wide suffering? So it's difficult, but I still think that if you know what we're going through, it will help you times ahead. Another aspect of suffering that makes it difficult to preach on is that the reason for suffering is veiled, it's concealed, it's hidden. We don't know, we sometimes, not often, we sometimes don't know why we are suffering. And the danger of Lamentations is that because it's a book that says you suffer because you sin, there is a danger that as you hear the sermons today and next, this is a 5-part sermon, so you will keep hearing that suffering is because I sin, and that's not true. There is more than one reason why you are suffering, okay? Or there might be more than one reason, and I want to put a disclaimer over here that it's not necessarily true that you're suffering because you sin. In this book, which I found very helpful, Kaiser, he wrote this Grief and Pain in the Plan of God, Christian Assurance, and the Message of Lamentations. Okay, so this is a commentary on Lamentations. He says that retributive suffering is part of Lamentations. Now, I adapted the word. He doesn't say this word, I suffer because I sin, but I rephrase it so that it's easier for us to process. So that is just one aspect, and he goes through 8 aspects. So this is the first one, and he says that there's another form of suffering, which is disciplinary. So you don't suffer only as a punishment of sin. That's the first one. You suffer because you are to be corrected, moved, change course. And you see this in those verses I say. There's also vicarious suffering. So in Day of Atonement, the goat dies because he takes on the sin of other people. And then Isaiah, you have the suffering servant. And you have Christ, who suffers so that other people don't suffer. Empathetic. Now, it's not so much that you suffer the pain directly, but you suffer because the people that you love or because others suffer, right? So that is what we see from, for example, 1 Corinthians 12, verse 26. When one suffers, the whole body suffers. When one is honored, the whole body rejoices. So this is an example where when I see you suffer, when I know that you suffer, I also suffer. So that's empathetic suffering. It is doxological. I suffer to bring God praise. Joseph, he went through the prison, unjustly in prison, and then forgotten. At the end of the day, he is then exalted as the second highest rank in Egypt. And you see that it brings God praise as you see how God brings him out. And closely related is a testimonial. I suffer to testify of God. Now, this is before you even have that sense of you, even in the midst of suffering. So Job chapter 1, chapter 2, he hasn't seen the other part yet. Okay, he hasn't seen the ending, how God will turn it around, but he already testifies of God's goodness. And the same as Habakkuk as well. Even though everything is empty, there is no wine, there is no wheat, there's no flock, but then still I will praise God. So that is testimonial suffering. Revelatory, so you see Hosea with his adulterous wife, and shows and reveals. As Hosea suffers, but he reveals the faithfulness of God. And there is lastly, number 8, we have eschatological. So you see the suffering in the Old Testament and New Testament is closely related also with the coming glory. So there is a time, and in that sense, we suffer in this time in waiting for the hope that is to come. Right? So that is the 8 forms of suffering. And there might be more, but that's what Kaiser has listed. And you will see that the reasons are many, so you cannot just conclude that the reason why you suffer is because you sin. I think that is the wrong conclusion, and we must be very careful that we do not conclude it that way, whether it's other people doing it to you or whether it's you doing it to yourself. I think that it's wise to know that there may be more than one. But at the same time, it's wise to know that if indeed you're suffering because you sin, then to make repentance your goal. And that's something I'll deal with in Lamentations. You also notice, I hope, that many of these things overlap. So it's not like it's only one and only one. You could actually have overlaps between them. You're being punished for your sin, but the punishment also is supposed to lead you towards correction. So there may be overlaps. It's unconfirmed. What I'm going to say here with unconfirmed is that we may not really know which one it is. So there is that sense of uncertainty. It's not exhaustive. There may be more. It's biblical. Notice that all these things I have placed the scripture verses, which is from the book, but then I put the scripture verses. Why? Because I want to show you that this is not from psychology. This is not from man's thinking. This is actually from the Bible. All right? And it's common to man, meaning that this is not something special for the specific prophets or kings or priests. It is something you see, I hope, that can be applicable to a wide variety of people even today. Right? That all these 8 forms of suffering is something that you and I, or the church, this time, in the past, in the future, will actually experience. So it is something that's common to man. So, with this broad overview of suffering, I want to now then just narrow in, zoom in into retributive. Retributive is saying that you suffer because you sin, and that is the message of Lamentations. In Lamentations, we see the author, he wrote 5 poems. Each poem is 1 chapter. So we're looking at the first poem, it's in Lamentations 1. And just you need to read it correctly, okay? And reading correctly means that you need to understand the emotional background that is coming in. The person is crying, the person is weeping, there's great profound sadness, very, very deep sadness, okay? And it's the deepest form of sadness that is in the Bible. And I struggle to actually explain it because one way of explaining it is talking about what Jerusalem is to the Israelites, the city of David, where the temple is, the city, the land, the people. I mean, a lot of things are centered around Jerusalem. So the loss of Jerusalem over many, many years is the pride and joy of the people. And that loss, the breaking, the burning, the wreckage, the people being killed, taken away, and all these things, it seems as if the promises of God is no longer true. And for some of us who are far away, I mean, you're 2,000, more than 2,000, you are 2,500 years away from this time, and you are many, many kilometers, thousands of kilometers away from this place, and you might find yourself very distant, you don't understand. So I would say that the person is crying because his home is no more. And it's a place that you've stayed in since you were born in, and then there's a sense, there's a sense of sorrow, and he's crying out, okay? So you may not need to understand Jerusalem in fullness, but I think if your friend lost his home and got burned down, and all his treasured possessions are inside, and his family was also lost, his loved one was lost, I think you should understand that the person is grieving and mourning, and I think you should have a sense of sadness. And this is a short psalm, explains a bit. By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept. Babylon is actually the place where they were carried off. When we remembered Zion, so the temple was built on the mountain of Zion in Jerusalem. On the willows there we hung up our lyres, for there our captors required of a song. So now tormentors mirth, making fun, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How shall we sing this Lord's song in the foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. So this Psalm 137 talks about that again, that sorrow. And this Psalm, which is 9 verses long, is just a short summary, short taste of what Lamentations is going through in 5 chapters, in many, many verses, which we'll read through now. So again, we have this background. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that we have this background, and as we read through, I hope you are in the correct emotional heartbeat to see what the author is saying. Lamentations chapter 1 verse 1. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow has she become, she who was great among the nations. She who was a princess among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile because of affliction and hard servitude. She dwells now among the nations but finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for none come to the festival. All her gates are desolate, her priests groan, her virgins have been afflicted, and she herself suffers bitterly. Her foes have become the head, her enemies prosper, because the Lord has afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone away, captives before the foe. From the daughter of Zion, all her majesty has departed. Her princes have become like deer that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembers in the days of her affliction and wandering all the precious things that were hers from days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the foe, and there was none to help her. Her foes gloated over her, they mocked at her downfall. Jerusalem sinned grievously, therefore she became filthy. All who honored her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns her face away. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future, therefore her fall is terrible. She has no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. The enemy has stretched out his hands over all her precious things, for she has seen the nations enter her sanctuary, those whom you forbade to enter your congregation. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, and see, for I am despised. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. From on high he sent fire, into my bones he made it descend. He spread a net for my feet, he turned me back. He has left me stunned, faint all the day long. My transgressions were bound into a yoke. By his hand they were fastened together. They were set upon my neck. He caused my strength to fail. The Lord gave me into the hands of those whom I cannot withstand. The Lord rejected all my mighty men in my midst. He summoned an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden, as in a winepress, the virgin daughter of Judah. For these things I weep. My eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is none to comfort her. The Lord has commanded against Jacob that his neighbors should be his foes. Jerusalem has become a filthy thing among them. The Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. But hear, all you peoples, and see my suffering. My young women and my young men have gone into captivity. I called to my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and elders perished in the city, while they sought food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord, for I am in distress. My stomach churns. My heart is wrung within me, because I have been very rebellious. In the street the sword bereaves. In the house it is like death. They heard my groaning, yet there is no one to comfort me. All my enemies have heard of my trouble. They are glad that you have done it. You have brought the day you announced. Now let them be as I am. Let all their evil doing come before you, and deal with them as you have dealt with me, because of all my transgressions. For my groans are many, and my heart is faint. Come, let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, Lord, I ask that you help us near and far to understand this poem of Lamentations, that we can understand the emotional depth and to understand the consolation that is to come. Thank you, O God, in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. There is one aspect of this poem, you see, is that there's a lot of remembering the past in the dust. So, in great sorrow, this Jerusalem is remembering what was the glory days and what compares it with now. And let's address something. A lot of times people would say that don't dwell in the past, look to the future, and they just want you to get out. So when you're trying to be sad, or when you are sad, then they say, no, don't be sad, don't be sad. Come, go and look into other things. Don't look there. And there is some maybe scriptural basis. Okay, so if you look at Genesis 19, when God punished Sodom, the angel brought them out, brought Lot and his family out. One of the angels said, escape for your life, do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Skip forward, but Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Isn't this obviously very clear that don't look back, don't dwell in the past? Another one, Numbers 11 verse 5, we have the Israelites leaving Egypt, and then they remember So this is the Israelites talking. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. So they're remembering the past, and God was very unhappy, he was very displeased with them looking towards the past. And this is Paul himself writing in Philippians. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. So you can see over here that obviously, parents, the Bible is saying don't dwell in the past, look to the future, or look to somewhere else, but don't look towards the past. And my answer to that is don't apply the Bible wrongly. The application is not forget the past and move forward. We say, but parents, look at it. What does it say? Forget the past and look forward. And I would say read it in context. Okay, so it's very important. Otherwise, you can make the Bible say anything you want. At the end of the day, all these three examples, right? The first one is Lot's wife looking back towards Sodom. Sodom is not of God. We see the Israelites looking back towards Egypt, where God saved them out of slavery, and they're looking back towards the good old days of slavery, which is not of God. And then when Paul was talking about this, he was just concluding about he was an Israelite, he was a Pharisee, he was all these things. So he's saying that I forget all these things that I was before, and I now look towards who I am in the future, now and the future to come. So when they're talking about not looking back, they're talking about the danger is remembering not God. Okay, so we want to not, how do I say this? You must not remember things that are of sin. Okay, not look kindly, fondly at how the good life was when you were sleeping around, when you were drinking and getting drunk and vomiting, when you were a drug addict. You know what I'm saying? You're not trying to. The point is true. You're not supposed to look back into the so-called good days of sin. And that is what these three passages is talking about. Remembering things that were not of God. So those are things that we don't want to do. You see this, okay? The Psalms that we read. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. If I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Why does he say that? Because he's saying that I want to remember God. Jerusalem and God, are they both related? Yes, it is. Because Jerusalem is a city of Zion, the city of God, the city of David. So it's the place where they remember the promises of God for Jerusalem. So it's not saying that I want to remember Jerusalem for all the sins I've done there, which I enjoy. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that that is where the glory of God, the temple of God, the promises of God, the promised land, the land of milk and honey, all these things are there, you see. So, and we have this. I mean, you talk about the Sabbath. It's a time where we remember God. You have Purim. If you look at the book of Esther, and even today, the Jews still remember Purim, where God saved them. So we remember days. We remember also the fall of Jerusalem. That is what the Jews do. You know what the Jews do to remember the fall of Jerusalem? They read Lamentations. So that's how they remember the fall of Jerusalem. And even for Christians, we also have Christmas. Why do we remember Christmas? Why do we celebrate Christmas? It's to remember the birth of Christ. We are coming towards Good Friday, and then we are also coming towards Easter Sunday. Again, those are remembering. Okay? Remembering what God has done, what God in using those days to remember. We also remember places. Okay? Remember Eden. Remember that God has put memorials in the Old Testament to remember things. So God wants us to remember. We remember Egypt. Why? Because remember of the Exodus, where God saved the people from slavery. Remember the Promised Land. Remember the temple, remember Jerusalem, remember a lot of things more. Gethsemane, the tomb, the cross. So there are things that remember God. Okay? So we remember places, we remember days. We also remember words. Remember the word of God. So we have the covenants, the commandments of God. Remember history, wisdom, prophecy, poetry, gospel, epistles. So we are asked to remember, okay? So, and a lot of these things happen in the past, yeah? All these things happen in our past. And we also have actions. So the Israelites remember the Passover, where they were saved. And we also have baptism. Baptism is witnessed by all of us. And we are asked to remember our baptism. If you look at the letters, we have the Lord's Supper, which we do every month. And we have testimonies, worship, eulogies, and more. So all these things are remembering. And they're all connected to God, you see. So when we talk about remembering the past in the dust, is it something that you should do? Some people say that you should not dwell in the past. Well, I'm not asking that you dwell in the past. Remembering the past is different from dwelling in the past. Because I don't want you to stay, but I do want you to process it. It is part of your life. And as you look back into your past, notice that in Lamentations, when they remember the past, right, and they remember the suffering now, it's supposed to contrast the good days and the good days then and the bad days now. And in doing so, you're also remembering the goodness of God before, and here in Lamentations, you're remembering the God's punishment on the people. So in that contrast, right, it's supposed to make you weep. You are supposed to weep. You are supposed to cry. You are supposed to be sad because the good old days of God, coming to church, praising God with songs, being able to pray for others, being able to fellowship. I mean, these are beautiful things. Relationships, remembering your marriage. Sorry, I'm talking to youth. But remembering romantic relationships, how they were in going to church together and in prayers together, or in friendships and family and so on, the goodness of those relationships before they got broken. If they got broken because of sin, your sin or their sin, if they got broken because of sin, it's good to remember the good things, to contrast with the bad things, and remembering that how God has blessed and how we have fallen. So I think remembering the past is a positive thing. Okay? At least from the Bible, it looks positive. And there's one sense, okay, that we see over here that there is no comfort, only pain. You see, So you see in this one part, all right? So you see in this one part, among all her lovers, she has none to comfort her. Comfort is a theme of this chapter 1. It's mentioned 5 times. And you see, therefore her fall is terrible. She has no comforter. For a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is none to comfort her. They heard my groaning, yet there is no one to comfort me. So you see in this great pain that this poem has, this great pain, that she is looking for comfort. I have nothing to comfort me. I'm crying. I'm so distressed. I'm so grieving, and there is nothing to comfort me. And that is right. Yeah, in this poem, you will see that there is no thanksgiving, there is no positivity, there is no turnaround. There is just pain and loss. There is no resolution. And we see, okay, I'm going to show you that this is a deliberate part of the poem for there to be no resolution. Now, there are many psalms where you have a resolution at the end. Okay? What I mean by resolution is saying this. There are many psalms that says at the end that, but no matter what, I praise my God. Oh God, you will save me. So you're repeating the promises of God. You're saying that God, you are my hope. God, you are my refuge. So there is that sense at the end of every trouble that you have, you're going to conclude and say that, God, I still lean upon you and you will comfort me. So, but you don't have that here. And I say that this is part, okay, not full part of the Christian living. To understand that there are sometimes, maybe very, very few times in the person or in the church's life where there seems to be no comfort coming in. And it's not just, you could argue with me that, Terence, this is only chapter 1. Chapter 3 has the comfort. So you need to read the whole 5 chapters of Lamentations. Otherwise, you're taking it out of context. That may or may not be true. I have an argument for that, but I'm going to give a different argument. Look at Psalms 88. Every one of us understands that the Psalms are fairly independent, meaning that to understand Psalms, you don't need to read through Psalms 1 to Psalms 150. Each Psalm is actually independent, more or less, independent by itself. Okay? So now read these Psalms. Psalm 88. So if you think about lucky numbers, 88 is supposed to be lucky. But let's see whether you still believe it after the end of this psalm. O Lord, God of my salvation, I cry out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol, which is the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength, like one set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. Selah. You have caused my companions to shun me. You have made me a horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape. My eye grows dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon you, O Lord. I spread out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the departed rise up to praise you? Selah. Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon? Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? But I, O Lord, cry to you. In the morning my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast my soul away? Why do you hide your face from me? Afflicted and close to death from my youth up, I suffer your terrors. I am helpless. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dreadful assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. They close in on me together. You have caused my beloved and my friend to shun me. My companions have become darkness. And that's the end. Is there any consolation? Is there any, I will hold on to the Lord? Do you see this? There is no resolution. At the end of the poetry, right, there is no comfort. This is Psalms 88. I want to say that this is the most heavy and most dark psalm in all 150 psalms there are. So, there is no thanksgiving, no positivity, just pain and loss. And these are a few words that people say when we talk about, when I'm sad, you will hear these things. And I'm not saying these things are bad, all right? And I would say these things. I'm just saying that there are times and places where these words are not the best thing or the right thing to say. Okay? So count your blessings, don't feel so bad. Let us cheer you up, bring you out for a movie, let us go for, just cheer you up, telling them that there's a reason for everything. Or sometimes we always say this, right? It could be worse. That's the way I think. It could be worse. So all these things are trying to turn the sorrow around. So the person is in sorrow and you're trying to kick the sorrow out of the person. And now notice that if the situation is like this, you just received news that your loved one died. How are you going to tell the fella? Count your blessings. Don't feel so bad. Come on, cheer up. There is a reason for everything. It could be worse. Ay, ay, ay. Do you see? That sometimes, you can say sometimes, right? You have to be very careful. This is a very dangerous sermon. I'm not saying that you can't say these words. What I'm saying is that sometimes these words cause more harm. When somebody is grieving, a great grief, and I'm not saying it must be death. I'm saying that sometimes people grieve over terrible things, a broken relationship, studies, hopes, dreams, and then grieving. And sometimes in that grief, how are we going to help them or how are we going to help ourselves? And you see, there's no thanksgiving, no positivity, just pain and loss. And what I'm saying over here is, it is okay. And this is, I think, a message that may be hard for many people to swallow. That it is okay to grieve. That it is okay to mourn. That you don't have to turn it around to some positive energy. Because you want to cry. You want to weep. What I'm saying right now is, weep. Cry. Mourn. Grieve. Where is your comfort? You search for comfort. And I tell you honestly, when you're going through that bottom, there is no comfort that can be given to you. Okay? But is that the end? No. You see, it is okay to go into that sorrow. But as you go into that sorrow, right, this is the last point I want to make. You bring the past and the pain to the Lord. And see this. Throughout Lamentations, you notice that the mind of the writer is still upon God. O Lord, behold, see, therefore her fall is terrible, she has no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction. So even when struggling with no comforter, next line says, O Lord, behold my affliction, look at me, for the enemy has triumphed. Look, O Lord, and see, for I am despised. The Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. Look, O Lord. So you see that there is a sense that even through my great comfort, you're still looking for God. And this is the important thing. We must look for God. Because if you are looking for comfort, you see, our understanding of comfort is that it's a removal of sorrow. And it's not necessarily, comfort doesn't necessarily work like that. The comfort, it can come from the remembering. The comfort can come from bringing it out to God. Okay? And God doesn't necessarily remove the sorrow, but God is next to you. And it's the same like grieving. If someone is at a funeral, your role is not to make him happy because he has lost a person he has loved. Your role could just simply be being there for him or her. And by being there for him or her, you are not removing the sorrow. Comfort, in this sense, is, okay, he's talking about just being there. And what I want to say here is that the Lord is there. So that is what the poet is writing over here. That God, I'm still bringing everything to you. Notice, he's not bringing out to the people. He's not saying that, look at me, people of Edom. Look at me, O people of Tyre. Look at me, O Sidon. Look at me, O Egypt. He's not doing that, right? He's saying, look, O Lord. Look, O Lord. So he's still bringing it to God. And bear in mind, who brought it upon Jerusalem? God. So you see, this is a thing that I want to talk about next sermon. But even when it is God who inflicts the suffering, okay? Even when it's God who has inflicted the suffering because of the sin, the sinner still returns to God and say that, look, O Lord, at my pain. And that's what I want all of us to do. Okay? Maybe you don't need it now, but one day you will. I want you to look to God, even in your sorrow. And we see over here how to look at God. We have seen that there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is actually to move us towards God. Okay? And we must have a God word. Alright, so that's a word I created, so it's a God word. And a lot of the list that we have over here, right? We have it, it's very I-centered, the self, because again, we are the one feeling the pain. But if you try to turn it around to see what is God doing, okay, let's look at it. I suffer because I sin. God punishes sin because he is just. God corrects his children because he loves them. Isn't it? And I suffer so others don't. Remember Christ. Christ took our suffering upon himself. The greatest suffering, I mean, all our suffering cannot be compared to the suffering that Christ took upon himself for sin and separation from God. I suffer because others do. God grieves for our suffering. God does not take any joy when people suffer. And God is not indifferent when we suffer. Understand or not? One is to say that God enjoys. That would be an evil God. God does not rejoice in our suffering. But neither does God feel nothing, indifferent. God grieves for our suffering. And God turns our suffering to praise. It is God who works it out. Do you notice? Not in Joseph. It's not Joseph who is able to turn himself into Pharaoh, Pharaoh's right-hand man. It is God who makes it happen. Yeah, the dreams of Joseph come out, and then so it's also true that it is God who turns us around. And God receives our testimony. We testify of God. And God is the one who reveals himself through our suffering, and it is God who is our hope and our glory. So you see, we turn everything towards God in our sorrow. So the three things to conclude today, from what we learned from Lamentations chapter 1, is that it's okay to remember the past, but remember the good things, not the bad things, okay? We don't want to remember how great sin was. That's the wrong thing to remember. Remember how God worked in our life, how God blessed us. And you might even find that you realize, like what the Jerusalem people realized too late, that God was blessing them, blessing them, blessing them. And then you only realize it when God took away. He gave and take away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So he gave and take away, and then still you can remember. Okay? And even if you find no comfort, only pain, it is okay. That is one of the assurance I have for you, that it is okay to feel comfort. And next week, I'll talk about how can you process it. Okay? Right now, I'm just saying that it's okay to do it, but next week, I'll tell you how to do it. And then bring the past and the pain to the Lord. Okay? So the key part is that whatever method that you do, you bring the past and the pain to the Lord. Bring God into your life, into that conversation, so that your sorrow brings you nearer to God. Okay? Even though it is God who inflicts the pain. Okay? That is one of the greatest paradox and mystery of this chapter. It is God who inflicts the pain, and then you draw near to Him. Why do you do that? Next week, I'll explain, because I don't have that much time today. So remember these three things. Okay? And I pray that this will bring you comfort in your soul. So let's close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, Lord, I pray that the people who hear this, they will understand that everything that's preached today is from your word. Your word is true, and your word is life. So Lord, I ask that you just help them to understand Lamentations, so that they will be able to remember your goodness, your blessings, even when a time of tragedy arrives on the door. But they still be able to remember the past and be able to hold on to the promises of God and to all those wonderful things, even as they contrast it with the suffering they go through now. And Lord, for many of us, we struggle with processing pain, but Lord, I ask that you help us to know that it's okay to feel pain. And we bring our past and our pain to you, O God, because you are in control, you are our only comfort, you are our salvation. So Lord God of our salvation, I ask that you help us know you and to know your comfort. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. God bless you.